So, are you curious?
Welcome to the Curiosity Codex. I am your ardent enthusiast, Kyle Olson. With me is my hapless cohort, Rob Cabasco.
Good day, sir.
Good day, and here we are, our big finale. And so I think people have been waiting to hear these words.
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
It's time to go all the way back to where it began, the birth of a phenomenon. Kirk, Spock, Bones, Uhura, Chekhov, Scotty, Sulu.
From 1966, it's Star Trek, the original series.
I'm glad you didn't have me sing the falsetto there. Yeah, that was a good work.
Don't want to get a suit.
Yeah, well, no, that didn't even sound like it. Yeah, no worries. No.
No one's gonna mistake.
No one's gonna mistake.
So tell me, what was your first exposure to original series?
Well, I think I've mentioned I understood that it existed. There was residual toy stuff that was still out there. Yep. I had the stupid we talked about, I think, in past things, the helmet, the crazy helmet.
The first episode we talked about.
Right, yeah, we talked about all that stuff.
The weird merchandise. If you want to hear more about, there's an excellent episode of The Toys That Made Us on Netflix that talks all about the Star Trek merchandise.
Yes.
So I would say, once you're done listening to this, go watch that because it's really good and really funny.
Oh, and you learn, and honestly, learning about the action figure market at the early days of all this, it's incredible. Right. Before Star Wars took over the small action figure thing, there was a much different action figure market. No, I probably, as a child of the 70s, remember a little bit.
It was not on when we were young. But did you catch it in syndication?
I think I have memories of syndication because I knew of it. Here's my big memory I always have. Is that final shot in the credits of that ridiculous alien with the eyes and just looking at you on the screen?
Yeah.
And I always remember just thinking, what is that, right? and I'll be honest, I also remember when I would catch parts of episodes as a young child, I was perplexed and bored sometimes. and that changed tremendously. The movies changed my entire opinion of this. The original cast movies changed my understanding and opinion of Star Trek and of the original series. And I have gone back, watched multiple episodes of the original series. And again, it's a sort of an act of faith to say, okay, I'm going to look for the good things. I'm going to look for the nuggets of gold. It's not all that. There's a reason why the show, it was ahead of its time in a lot of ways. One of them is storytelling and pacing. It's just the way it is. You know what? They fixed it. By the time they got to the second movie, they found their groove. Like, I really honestly believe that about Star Trek, the original series and the original series cast. But what do you love about it? Why did it still become a big thing? It was an amazingly futuristic look at life and society of where we could be. Yep. And you got to say the three main characters, and I mean, and I know William Shatner, of course, it's iconic. Captain Kirk is iconic. There is nothing more than to say than that. Leonard Nimoy Spock is iconic, but I got to tell you, I always love Bones. Yeah. Always. DeForest Kelly, man, that character was absolutely perfect. That he was just phenomenal. I love him to this day.
Yeah. So let's go all the way back to 1966. So, Star Trek, where did it come from? Well, I say many books and podcasts have been written about this, so I'm going to not give you the full history, I think. But basically, this is a space western. Originally, cowboy shows were the biggest shows on television at the time. And so this was, when he pitched it, Gene Roddenberry called it Wagon Train to the Stars. Wagon Train was a hugely popular show that was just about people going from one place to another, and they would roll into another area and have another adventure. Well, he's like, same thing, just in space. And he actually referred to Captain Kirk as being Horatio Hornblower in space. It's the same kind of thing of out in the wild sea and what's going to happen. It was interesting that we talked a little bit about this in the last episode too. It actually had 2 pilot episodes. So they had this idea, and NBC was like, okay, well let's try it out, because for those of you who don't know about early days, a pilot was something that was often made and never ever seen. There are hundreds and hundreds of television shows that only got to ever do one episode and was never aired, and they're just sitting in a vault somewhere, hopefully. If not, they are like Monty Python, where they got wiped over. Like, well, we need to reuse these tapes, so no one's going to want to watch these shows again. Doctor Who? Nah, who's going to want to watch that again? Just wipe. So they shot a pilot with a different captain, still had Leonard Nimoy as Spock, different first officer, and they came out and they showed it to them. They're like, here's what you paid for. Super expensive because of all the sci-fi, the special effects. And NBC went, nah. They're like, but we think the idea is good. Could you just try that again? Went, oh, okay. So they're like, well, we like the tall guy with the pointy ears. Keep him. Fire everyone else. And except for like they number one, essentially, like she ended up becoming a different character. They kept the actress who went on to marry Gene Roddenberry, but she became a nurse instead of being the first officer, which at the time was pretty. It's 1966. First officer of the ship was a woman. Go Gene Roddenberry.
Yeah,
like how cool is that? But they scrapped everything and they went back, and so that's when they cast a veteran cowboy actor, William Shatner, along with a veteran cowboy actor, DeForest Kelley. Like they fill out the rest of the crew as well. So they got to do it again, and they came with the pilot, and they went, yes, that's what we want. And so they put the show into production, and it became the show that we know and love. But it was very different in the other one. Like the look was different, and like we were talking about with Star Trek Discovery, you can go back because they directly reference the events of that episode called The Cage, and then they end up reusing it in later in to us. It just gets confusing. But the fact that it had two pilots was pretty amazing because the concept was so strong. They were willing to write another sizable check to try it again. And so without that, there's so many ways that Star Trek could have gone terribly, terribly wrong, and we would never have gotten this far. It's just one of the amazing things that happened. So go ahead.
Sorry, the one thing I just want to say is because this is one of the things that always blows my mind. You know who you have to thank for Star Trek? Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball.
That's right. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, like I'd say there are so many roads where there's so many alternate universes where Star Trek didn't happen, and that is one of the things too, because at the time Lucille Ball, this was way past I Love Lucy time. So this is in the if you ever see Lucille Ball showing up on like Dick Cavett when she'd been smoking 2 packs a day and like had a very different voice than what we were used to. That's the Lucy that we're talking about from this period. But she was running Desilu Studios, and so at the time they actually were making the Lucy Show, like her later sitcom. And then once she was going out, they decided they were going to make 2 shows, and they were both super expensive shows. One of them was called Star Trek, and the other one was called Mission Impossible. And it came to the point where Lucille Ball had to sit down and go, which one of these do I want to financially support? And they had to go, could we like maybe take on a bunch of debt and do both? And she's like, okay. And that decision right there, Lucille Ball willing to take a chance on both of these shows, have resulted in billions of dollars.
Yeah.
It's amazing. The other time that Star Trek almost died was after the first season, because it was not a huge success. Like it was a primetime show on NBC, and it was not pulling in the numbers. But it got saved by another fantastic and powerful and brilliant woman named Bijou Trimble. Now, it actually is short for Betty Joanne, but she is one of the, I would say, deities of sci-fi. She loved Star Trek so much that she's like, we have to do something about this, and organized one of the first letter writing campaigns. And it got to the point where they would get, for a thing, they would get somewhere, a couple thousand letters, for a popular show. And like this is 1966. There was no other mass media way of getting your message across. So she organized this campaign on all the sci-fi conventions, which there were some along the way, and she would get addresses of people and then write them letters and say, hey, they're going to cancel Star Trek. You need to write a letter to 6 people who watch the show and tell them to write a letter to the NBC. and tell 6 people they know and do it. And she did. And they were getting 100,000 letters a week.
Yeah, it was huge.
Like they and even there's a story that she tells about how one of the executives came down to the mailroom and be like, oh, like I want to know like where are the letters for the show? And the guy's like, oh, okay. And he goes over and he like pulls out a bag and dumps it on the floor. Like, oh, they're like, oh, see, it's no big deal. Like, nobody really likes Star Trek that much. He's like, oh, you're here for Star Trek. Oh, follow me. And he goes and opens up a room, and the room is full of letters. He's like, we didn't know where to deliver them. And they went, oh no. And it got so insane that midway through the airing of the first season, they actually had to have an announcement at the end of the episode. Star Trek will be returning for season 2. Please stop writing letters. The only reason we are doing this show, and it continues on, is because of Bijou Trimble. She is 87 years old, living in Southern California, and deserves all the sci-fi love you can give her.
Yeah.
She's amazing. If you go back and listen on one of Dana Gould, our podcast, he does an interview with her and her husband, who also helped a lot too, but like she was the main instigator, and she is still sharp as a tack and fantastic storyteller. Like, man, if ever there's one to make it behind the scenes about the Star Trek show, that's the story you need to tell. Like, don't tell about casting of William Shatner. You need to talk about Bijou Trimble.
Do you know what? Just a little side note. For those of you who are fans of a different science fiction property, Doctor Who, when Doctor Who celebrated its 50th anniversary, the BBC produced an amazing television movie about the making of Doctor Who.
Yes.
That absolutely...
An adventure in space and time?
Yes, adventures in space and time.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that should be made about the beginnings and the making of Star Trek.
Yes. 1,000%.
Yes. Get the same people who made that. Just do it. That's the blueprint. Do it like that. Get Shatner in to film a scene at the end. Just like they totally. Oh my God, it would be amazing. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love it. Yeah. If they can do Bohemian Rhapsody, by God, they can do the story of the making of Star Trek. So let's talk about where we're at in the timeline. So we're in the final frontier. So the year is 2266. Now, that means that if you go by all the shows we've talked about, that these adventures have been preceded by Enterprise, Discovery, The Cage, that was the unaired pilot, and the upcoming show, Strange New Worlds. All of them have happened in their entirety before this episode airs, just because math? I don't know. Like, why? It's just because that's where they would decide they want to tell their stories. When we meet our hero, Captain James T. Kirk, he is not the first captain of the Enterprise. He is the second captain of this particular Enterprise, because Captain Pike was the original captain. He was in the unaired pilot of The Cage. He shows up on Star Trek Discovery, and he's going to be the lead in Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So there is another captain. So it's interesting that they don't have him be like, he's not the one who christened the ship or anything. He's just like the latest guy with a job, and yet ends up being one of the most popular captains in all of Starfleet, and obviously probably the most popular or most well-known character. I don't know. Would you say that Spock or Kirk is more well-known?
Oh,
in the larger pop culture universe.
No,
outside of Trek.
In the larger pop culture universe, it's Spock. The ears.
I think it has to be Spock.
It's Spock. Yeah,
So
that's why. Yeah.
Leonard Nimoy as Spock. Just one name, Spock. He is the chief science officer, and then the chief medical officer is Bones, Lieutenant. I say Dr. McCoy, who is played by DeForest Kelley, and the three of them are really what forms the core of this show. Now, there's a lot of fantastic characters who have gone on to do everything and continue on, and we're going to talk a little bit about those. But I think it's that trinity that really is what makes this show, because you have the brash, bold. I'm trying to think of it. Everything I can think of to describe him would not be appropriate for this PG-rated podcast. Confident.
Sure. Bravado.
Right. And so you have like, you always, right out there in front, doesn't let push him around. And then you've got Spock, who's very logical and calm and like always wants to look at things from a distant, scientific perspective. And you have Bones, who is sort of like the guy leads with his gut and always says what he's going to think, and like is always want to be like, whoa, hold on, we shouldn't be, And so the interplay between the three of them is really what the best of Star Trek, the original series, is. It's just, you can put the three of them on screen, talk about anything, and it's great.
It's so, you can't undersell the dynamic of characters that the three core Star Trek original series characters have. And I will say, like I've said, DeForest Kelly's my favorite. Bones, what is great about Bones is Kirk, is you've got all these different archetypes, but Kirk is the hot-blooded guy who's going to go in, fight,
He's going to punch the bad guys and kiss the pretty girl.
Exactly. You've got Spock, who is the exact opposite, total, baseline, emotionless, but a lot, and based in logic, obviously. But the one thing I've always loved about Bones is that Bones, you always got this idea that he is cantankerous, he is moody, he is cynical, but at the end of the day, he will jump on the grenade before anybody else. Like, he's the guy who is he is the one who makes it work.
Yeah.
Between the two of them. Like, I have always thought that, like, for real. And I know they explore that, like, later on, like, in the movies, but he is, I don't know. I really believe this. I don't know if the Kirk Spock dynamic works without Bones.
I would agree with that. And the same thing, put any combination of characters, those two together, and it's magic.
Yes, totally.
Here we are in 2266. We have transporters, so like they're beaming from place to place. We don't have food replicators yet, but we have food synthesizers, which I'm not 100% sure what the difference is, but I know it involves cards. Like you have to put multiple cards into a thing to get the food you want. It's still, there's not like a chef. They don't complain about the food, so it must still be pretty good. But we're using communicators, so obviously this is 1966, and they were using a device you hold in your hand that you could use to contact people around the world.
Unbelievable.
It's amazing.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, like they predicted way back then. That's like the only thing they didn't have is that ours don't have a little flip thing anymore. Like, but they did at one point. And they also have, and we're at phasers as well. So they have phasers, of course, famously have two settings: stun and kill.
One of the things I really always loved about those, the original phaser, that was the 2-part phaser, right? Where it actually had a phaser. Was that the one that had 2 parts you could?
Oh yes,
right.
That's
like,
right.
Like you had the little element that you could use just as a phase, like as a phaser, as a stun gun. But then if you put it into the pistol apparatus
with the sort of the battery handle. Yeah.
Oh, I think the design of that, and then you got into where you got to see for your first time a tricorder, right? I mean, is it
right?
Yeah, I mean,
Spock would carry around like a sort of a large scientific scanner device that was about the size of an iPad but thicker, and it had like a LED screen that he would use to do scientific research on.
It was all reminiscent of what I always thought was like 60s photography equipment. The black leather, like, you know what I mean? Like with the straps and everything, it all had that look. But, you hadn't seen. So think about the 60s. I mean, what are we, we're coming out of the space race in the 50s and getting people into space. You have the aesthetic that all connects all this. And then you got like 2001: A Space Odyssey comes out like near the end of this. There was a very interesting, which I think really helped the show, was this idea of technology, but it being minimalist. Because that's one of the neat things I think about this. All of those things you just mentioned, they're tools that they just have a couple of buttons and they do their job, right? And that's it. So, I mean, they had a really nice look at what things could be and where things were going.
So this was a 5-year mission. So that was what they always said at the beginning of it. And so we only got to see like 3 years of this 5-year mission. They did chronicle some of the adventures in an animated series, which came after it. A lot of the voice actors went over and did their stuff too. But unfortunately, Star Trek was tragically cut short. By the 3rd season, it was canceled, and everybody thought that was it. But then the fan demand was, and the thing that they were trying to do, especially the campaign, is get them to 100 episodes, because that's the only way that a show's got syndicated is if you hit that magic 100 episodes.
Even then,
So Star Trek fell short of that, and so they thought that it was going to disappear in the archives and it would never be seen again. And so they campaigned for that too, and eventually got it go, and it became one of the highest rated syndicated shows of all time. I mean, because by the time that we were watching shows in the late 70s, early 80s, it was still being shown. I mean, like what other show? I mean, you've got Addams Family, Munsters, Gilligan's Island, and Star Trek. Like, what else made it out of that era that still people talk about to this day? Very, very, very few shows for the amount of things that came out. Like, nobody's watching old episodes of Adam 12.
Emergency.
Yeah, right. That's right. Like there. I mean, there isn't a big syndicated market for chips. You know, like
no, there really isn't.
That was big in our time. That just like came and went, and will not be seen again. But you can still, Star Trek is still being aired right now too. So why are we talking about it last? Well, it is such a different show, not only from modern sci-fi shows. So like if you think about Battlestar Galactica, if you think about Firefly, if you think about even Lost, those are really, really wrong comparisons, because it is nothing like any of what we think of as modern sci-fi. The two things I can think of that are better to think about when you approach the series are, well, I can sum it up in 3 words: stately Wayne Manor. Because the 60s Batman is much more analogous to Star Trek than it is to any of the rest of the sci-fi shows. It is bright colors, it is overacting, it is big costumes and that kind of stuff. And it also is so unlike any other version of what comes after. The 60s Batman is so different than any other Batman incarnation, but still has its fan and still has a valid place in pop culture. In the same way that Star Trek is very much, the original series is very much a thing of its own. So different from Next Generation, so different from Deep Space Nine, so different from Strange New Worlds, and potentially what it's going to be taking place in the same time period. And entirely different than the movie version of the same kind of stories. And the other one that I would say would be a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. Twilight Zone. Actually, this is very, very similar to Twilight Zone because these are morality plays.
Oh, yes.
Like, there's a lot of very, very direct references to what was going on in culture at the time. There's a episode of characters they have black skin on the left side and white skin on the right side, and they hate the people with white skin on the left side and black on the left side. Like, you get it? It's the same kind of thing. They are very direct references to what's going on about the Cold War, about racism, about sexism, like all these things in very, very clear stories analogous to what is going on. I think those two, if you understand that it is a combination of the 66 Batman and Twilight Zone, going into it there, you're going to have a much better time than if you go in expecting it to be like any of the other shows we've talked about in the previous 4 episodes.
That's really funny that you mentioned the 60s Batman, considering that episode you're mentioning about the 2-colored person.
Yeah.
One of the main characters is from the 60s Batman show, playing a very popular character.
That's right. Ends up in the main character in that episode ends up playing the Riddler, and probably within a year or so.
Oh yeah, totally. He walked across the street, and then
but even at the same studio, probably just down the hall. So it is a little bit good because yes, the acting is kind of hammy. And the effects are kind of hokey, and the makeup is kind of, by our standards, sort of low rent. But it was also, at the time, the best that they could do.
And here's the thing: I don't think you wouldn't tell anybody if you want to dabble in this. I wouldn't tell anybody, oh, watch all 3 seasons or watch a season. No. Listen, it's like throwing a rock. You can Google top 10 episodes of the original Star Trek series.
Yeah,
you're gonna get 2,500 lists. Yeah. And all of them are 60% right.
Yep. And you can watch them in any order you want.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Besides some minor costume changes and the James Kirk's initial in the changing, nothing else matters.
No, exactly.
It's you don't need to like oh, where's he at in his life now? Is he still?
No,
it doesn't matter.
No, it's not that complicated.
They're all designed to just to really watch at any time, any point, any order you'd like.
And just like what we said in the previous episode, don't think that there's not any, guess what? There's Nazis. There's
there are cowboys.
There's cowboys. There's gangsters.
There's Romans.
They hit all the buttons. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is just one shade up from Lost in Space.
Yeah. Yes. Oh.
And so much so that they used a lot of the same props back and forth because waste not, want not. It's 1966. You can't just make up your own phase pistols every single time.
True.
But that being said, there is a lot of stuff they did that was really trend-setting, and still to this day is where they had an international crew. Now, this was a big deal because 1966 was a tense time in the world, but suddenly the show comes up, and not only is there an alien on the bridge, but there's a Russian. Whoa, wait a minute, we're at war with the Russians, and their communications officer is a black woman. What? Like, you had a Asian man, I don't think they said specifically what he was, at the helm, Mr. Sulu. Like, this was a big deal because there's all these people are just working together just because we're all just people.
Right.
Like, in 1966, that was huge. And obviously, talking about Nichelle Nichols, not only was she part of the first interracial kiss on television, but she was like, I don't know if I should. I'm the only black woman on the show. Like, it's hard. Like, it's a crappy sci-fi show. Like, maybe I should leave. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "You need to stay on that show. People need to see you because you're one of the crew, and it's important." I mean, come on. I mean, like, yeah. So obviously, is it the most evolved show? It isn't. There's still a lot of like, problematic stuff about men and women.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Still 1966, and some stuff you couldn't shake. But it still was for its time. It was going in the right direction. And like Rob was saying, hit the highlights.
Oh,
like if you really want to get into it, go watch. There's Sitting on the Edge of Forever and Balance of Terror, and like there's a bunch of
Mirror. Like there's a couple ones you got.
A couple with Tribbles. Like there's a couple of these.
Yes.
You can jump right in, watch it, and you'll get it. Like when you go, oh, okay, I see what's going on. And if you love it, then you can go back and watch the entire thing. But I wouldn't just like, I'm gonna start episode 1 and work my way through, because you're gonna get about 6 episodes in and go, ooh.
And rarely we have not said this, because I know we've tried to stay away from this, but I'm going to just add this though. Once you've watched a couple of the episodes, then watch The Wrath of Khan. because really, well, no one actually watched that. There's that episode that connects to it, right? Like, because you won't believe how well it translates and how well, because there's a lot of things to be said about that. You get to see that cast really blossom in a much more accessible way for people. So I would add that in.
Yeah, and I would say of all of it, it's that trilogy. Now, if you can get into the rhythms of Shatner, and that will be the hardest thing because he is hamming it up, no question about it. But DeForest Kelley is so sincere, and Leonard Nimoy is so transcendental, just beyond, that you're gonna love Spock no matter what. Even in a terrible episode like Spock's Brain, you're still gonna love Spock. He's just a great character, and he was a great character. And once you've fallen in love with Leonard Nimoy, go watch For the Love of Spock, which is a documentary that his son created, and it is amazing just to see what was going on behind the scenes of that. So here we are, part 5, and that is my recommendations. Like, these are the things. So if you can get through it, go for it. But like, I think this was my best that I could come up with about how to get into Star Trek for a new person. And if you're a Star Trek fan, and you disagree with me, what a shock. Welcome to being a Trekker. It's just, obviously, this is just my opinion. You could have your own about different ways to do it. And I'd be curious to hear other people who have gotten people into Star Trek and how. Because I only talked about 5 shows. There are more. And so let's talk a little bit about those. And I'm not going to defend myself, but I'm going to talk a little bit about them and why I didn't think they made my 5. So let's talk about Star Trek Voyager. I got no problem with Star Trek Voyager. Star Trek Voyager is no better or worse than any of the rest of them. It has its own problems. It has its own thing. There is, a controversial cast change later on that ruffled a lot of feathers and ended up creating one of the best characters in all of Star Trek. What are you going to do? That is a show that was, I think, much more controlled by committee. It veered wildly from place to place as they were trying to figure out what they wanted to do. But a lot of Star Trek shows were like that. I only didn't put it on here because it covers sort of the same basis as Next Generation. And so it's, if you like Next Generation, you'll like Star Trek Voyager because it's the same kind of thing. It's really loose on plot. It's mostly episodic. They have a couple of ongoing running things to do, but for the most part, you can jump in and get it. So if that's Enterprise, Next Generation, Voyager are all of a theme. So I would say if you like any of those, you'll probably like the other ones too. I don't get as emotionally invested in Voyager just because I found I never really found much of the crew people that I really identified with. So there was on Deep Space Nine, I loved all those characters. Next Generation, I loved all those characters. On Voyager, I loved a couple of them, but like there's a couple that I never really warmed to, and I think that was part of the inconsistent writing. I wouldn't blame the actors because I've met a couple of the actors and they have all been phenomenal, and they also did a great job on it too. But it just wasn't my show, so that's why I didn't put it on there. But I don't have anything against it. It's just I think. For what I was trying to do, I think Next Generation is better for that category than Voyager is.
Totally agreed.
Next one I talk about would be Lower Decks. Now, Lower Decks is a currently airing animated show on Paramount Plus. It is really funny, but really steeped in Star Trek lore.
Well, Next Generation and Next Generation lore,
especially Next Generation, yeah. But they mentioned Deep Space Nine stuff, they mentioned Voyager stuff, they mentioned all, like original series, like they're all over the place. And also because it's its first season, what have we learned, folks? It is wildly different in tone. I feel like that show is 3 different shows all trying to compete for airspace. It's really enjoyable. I watched every single episode, and I have not watched every single episode of almost any of the other shows. Like, I have not seen any of the original series animated series. I haven't watched all of the episodes of the original series, but I've watched every episode of Lower Decks. So that goes to show you that it's not just about no, actually I really enjoyed it, and I really like the characters and where they're going, but that show really needs to find a definite place where it needs to stand, and before they start taking swings at everything. If
you watch it, here's just one thing to know. I don't mean to pigeonhole it like this, but it's like Family Guy set in Star Trek. I mean, it's that type of humor. And here's the thing.
I would actually say Rick and Morty.
Oh, maybe okay. Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty's a totally better analogy. Here's the thing. Yeah. You'll get in the first episode, and I guarantee you, if you like Star Trek in any way, you'll say to yourself, "I can't believe this show got made."
Yes. Yeah. Especially if you're a Star Trek fan and you watch it, you're like, I cannot believe this is actually a real thing, because it is reverent to continuity and yet still has fun within the universe without making fun of Star Trek.
And hugely irreverent. It is
very irreverent, but it doesn't be like, haha, Star Trek is dumb.
Oh, no.
We're awesome.
It's a wink, wink, nod, nod. Yeah, we love it too. Like,
because there are some unbelievable deep cuts that they'll do.
Yes.
So they'll just reference like one character appeared in one episode and just leave it. They don't make a big thing of it. They'll just like drop it there and then just move on. You go, were they actually just referencing when we were talking originally about this, you were shocked that I did not choose probably the best of all Star Trek films, which is The Wrath of Khan and my defense of that is I don't think it's indicative of Star Trek as a whole.
Right.
I think The Wrath of Khan is a phenomenal film, but isn't like any of the other Star Trek movies. So it's hard to bring people in and go, Wrath of Khan. You go, oh my God, that was amazing. What else is like that? Oh, yeah, there's one with whales.
There's a Next Generation movie that you could kind of make the case to, but I agree with you. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, everyone skips Star Trek the motion picture because it's really, really deliberately paced.
You gotta really love Star Trek.
You really do. Yeah.
I mean, and let me tell you,
they made a director's cut, and it was longer.
Yeah, it is.
And that movie was long to begin with.
You just have to really love it. And if you watch there's so many YouTube videos you can watch about the making of it and the whole thing that went into it. And I will tell you, you'll appreciate it.
Oh yeah,
but don't start
movies that you'll appreciate more than enjoy. I would say.
That's exactly it.
So yeah, that's the thing. I was thinking about that in terms of the original series as well. Important versus timeless. It's much more important than it is timeless.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think they did 6 movies. The rule always was even numbered Star Trek films don't suck. Basically, if you want to get into it, I would say 2, 4, 6. Like that's fine. But that being said, if you like it, you're going to like the other ones too.
Well, no, exactly right. Yeah, the first one, very, very marginal. The 5th one, almost as marginal.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, though, if you asked me, what's my favorite Star Trek? What's my favorite original cast Star Trek film?
Hey, Rob, what's your favorite original cast Star Trek film?
No contest. 6. The Undiscovered Country. No contest.
And I would say that is the most Star Trek of the 6 movies.
Exactly.
Because it's really tightly tied into the universe.
Yes. And it is a wonderful
appearance by a Next Generation cast member.
I mean, that was the height of where the original cast could go.
Yes.
I mean, because that was coming out while the Next Generation is on the airwaves. And it was the send-off. It was the official send-off of the total original cast.
Yeah.
It's still to this day. It's one of my favorite Star Trek films of all time.
And then Next Generation went on. They did 4 feature films as well. And the same thing, the same rule applies. About 50% good. That cast did not make the transition to feature films as smoothly as the original series cast. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was because they were
not
still,
their fault.
They were still doing the job.
Yeah.
And they were just like, now you're fired from a television show. Go make a movie. And it was like, oh, okay.
I think that's number one. Also, towards the end, they got saddled with just bad decisions.
Yeah, I feel bad that the final Next Generation film was probably the worst of the Star Trek movies.
And even Insurrection. Insurrection is...
I have a soft spot for Insurrection because I feel like Insurrection is a really good Next Generation episode. Which does it make a great movie?
Oh, that's exactly right.
It's a great episode.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And when we've been talking about like which one's the consumer one was First Contact. First Contact was made to be just
exactly.
an action
That's
horror
designed
movie in space.
That is the Wrath of Khan of the Next Generation thing, where like anybody can walk in and you can have a good time at First Contact. And actually, if you want to get into it, I would highly recommend just that one because it's about the events that caused the Star Trek Enterprise to happen. Full circle. We're right back to the other one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's right.
So let's talk about alternate timelines because we need to talk about J.J. Abrams. So, Star Trek was dead. Like it was like there were no movies, there was nothing happening. It was crickets. And so they went to young Wunderkind, the savior of several franchises, Mr. J.J. Abrams, and said, please do some Star Trek for us. And so he decided to tell Kirk's story again. He's going to reboot the universe. So I gotta say, I have to give props where it is because he didn't have to do what he did. He could have just been like, new guys playing Kirk, new guys playing Spock, new guys playing Bones. Here we go. But instead, he decided to honor all the stories that had gone before and not wipe them away. Right. So what we refer to this as the Kelvin timeline. I know you don't need to as a new viewer, but the idea is that the Spock that we have seen from the original series, who shows up in Next Generation, he has continued on and time travels back to chase people who are time traveling, and ends up causing a splinter, and a new timeline is formed. And from that, things have changed. So technology has changed, all these things have changed. And the reason I call it the Kelvin timeline is because the Kelvin is the ship that's there at the place where this time-traveling ship emerges. And so from that, Kirk's life has changed, Spock's life has changed, Bones' life has changed. And so they're recast essentially, and it's new adventures, but it's about how they first met, first came together, how Kirk first became Captain of the Enterprise. Totally different than what happened in the original series, but it's its own timeline. So from there, they did 2 more movies after that. And they broke the rule because it was an odd numbered Trek film and it's awesome. And they made a even numbered film and it was terrible. And then they made an odd numbered film and it was actually pretty good.
You know what?
Why didn't I put this on my list? Well, because it's a dead timeline, first of all, and second of all, it's not indicative of any other Star Trek. So it's like, is Star Trek from J.J. Abrams a great movie? Yeah, I think it is. Like, I think you can really go in and have a great time with it. But I would say stop there because it's not like any other Star Trek out there. I hated Star Trek Into Darkness just because they took the greatest stuff from Wrath of Khan, reheated it, reserved it to us, and tried to be like, look, it's the same thing again. You like this, you like it again, even though I changed the colors on some of the stuff. And lens flare, eat it up, nerds.
Can I tell you something, though?
No.
Oh, wait, I'm going to tell you still about Into Darkness. Here's the issue. If you're going into this cold, you made like into Darkness, right? Here's the problem. The problem is not no spoiler. They lied. They flat out lied to everybody.
Lied to the fans
about a major character, and they lied flat out and it's exactly what people thought it was, and then that's what ruined it. Like, I think people just hated being lied to. Plus, yes, they retreaded it, but if you didn't watch the original version of The Tread, it's not a bad movie. It has amazing special effects.
Special effects, I'll give you.
It has a moment of gratuitousness that we won't even discuss because it's so horrible, and they all agree with it today.
Worst moment of Star Trek.
Yes, but it has its moments. But the third movie, Beyond, which, but not a lot of people realize this, is the 50th anniversary celebration of Star Trek.
Yeah. Too bad.
Yeah.
I really liked Star Trek Beyond. I thought it was a really good, but once again, I liked it in the same way I liked Insurrection. It was a really good episode, but it as like a huge, gigantic movie that they like to put up there against all the Star Wars movies or anything else. No, not really.
Hey, listen, Beastie Boys got to eat. That's all I got to say on that.
And so that is done. Basically, there's no more of that. That we, I mean, at this point, as time of recording, there's all these ideas about other Star Trek movies, but like the Kelvin timeline is basically finished. So you watch them as a piece, but I would not say that is how you should experience Star Trek. But I also am not yucking anyone's yum. If you enjoy the movies, great. Like, go forth and watch them. I'm not saying don't watch them. I'm saying if you're going into Star Trek, that's not the way to get in because it's a road that doesn't go anywhere. It is a roller coaster. It goes one place, loops around, does crazy stuff, and then you end up right back where you started. The rest of Star Trek is a journey. But what about what comes next? So let's talk a little bit about the future of Star Trek. So we have the new season of Discovery is coming out in the fall. I assume you're listening to this relatively concurrently from when we recorded it. So in the fall of 2021, Discovery season 4 is coming out. Around about the same time, we don't exactly know for sure. A brand new series is launching out, The Adventures of Captain Christopher Pike, who was the original captain of that version of the Enterprise. It is called Star Trek Strange New Worlds. We've told it's much more of a throwback, much more similar to the procedural things we talked about with Enterprise and Next Generation, where they go to a place, they have an adventure, they fly away. But I would imagine there's still going to be a recurring theme and story going on there. And then also, his first officer is a woman, which is what they originally wanted to do in the Cage, and his science officer is Mr. Spock. So we're actually going to get to see young Spock adventures. He obviously is a part of Star Trek Discovery, but here it is sort of the Spock we know. The other one was much more of a different Spock than we were used to. This was much more the methodical, logical, acerbic Spock that Leonard Nimoy perfected. There is a new animated series coming called Star Trek Prodigy, which will star the captain of Star Trek Voyager, a holographic recreation of Catherine Janeway. So Janeway will actually be back as part of that show, and that is much more of a, I guess, Avatar: The Last Airbender sort of like young animated, exciting show. It's not going to be a comedy show like Lower Decks is. It's going to be much more of a youth adventure, and she's going to be sort of their AI guide as they're navigating through. I'm not exactly sure where that's set. I couldn't find much about it because it is so brand new that they're just starting to talk about it now, and they've just actually revealed her character. And then there are lots of Star Trek movies in development. Who knows what's going to come from there? And then there's a new season of Picard starting, and a lot of return, but it involves returning a lot of old friends, which you don't know if you're a brand new viewer. But enjoy Next Generation now, like while you can, and so you'll be ready for Picard season 2 when that premieres. And that is our trek through the stars. And woo.
Well done.
Well, thank you. I hope that people got some of this. So those are my 5 recommendations for getting into Trek here in Stardate 98904.35. And yes, that is the actual star date. If you can figure out how to translate that, you'll see exactly when this was recorded.
Hey, can I just add? Listen, so this has been enjoyable. You've done a great job. I think your love for this, and I have love for it, but I know this is a huge part of your geekdom, right?
Yeah.
And I will just say that if anybody were to say, well, why do I care about this? Star Trek's not going anywhere now.
No.
Star Trek, in terms of, and yes, it's Paramount Plus. I mean, that is the home of Star Trek until otherwise notified of acquisitions or other things.
Yeah.
They are investing a ton into it.
Yeah.
It has a thriving fan base. Maybe it's not as big as some other properties, right? Like the Marvel or other things, but It is a devoted fan base. They are continuing to branch out. They have something for everyone, which I think is what you're seeing.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I structured it this way.
Exactly.
Because these 5 things I did them in order of taste, not in terms of quality. I'm hoping that this will whet your appetite enough to go out and sample some of these things as you would at a restaurant, which is what we've been metaphoring this whole time thing. And maybe you'll find something that is to your liking. And I hope that when you do that, you'll come back and let us know.
Totally.
So I hope you have enjoyed your trek through the stars. We will see you further out there in the galaxy. And so for now, Captain's orders, do something nice for yourself. Thanks so much for listening. This has been the next chapter in the Curiosity Codex, but there are still many pages left to decipher. We're part of the True Story FM family of podcasts. Find out more about us at truestory.fm. Our theme music is Intrusion by Severed Personality, aka Kevin MacLeod. The voice of the Codex is Vicky Hall. Find her on the web at vickyhall.squarespace.com. My co-host is Rob Cabasco. Find him with me on the Marvel Movie Minute podcast. And my name is Kyle Olson.
The Codex is closed. For now.